Good afternoon. I am Arlo Davis. I work as the engagement coordinator here at the University of Alaska Fairbanks International Arctic Research Center. And today's episode of the monthly research speaker series, A Place for Knowledge Exchange, is happening Wednesday, the 15th of October, 2025. And before we start getting into our introductions about our speakers this month, um, we're I'm going to take a moment to pause and just say out loud that everybody is empathetic and thinking and concerned about all of the people in the areas affected by the recent typhoon, hurricane, um, the the flooding going on out there in Western Alaska. It's rough. So with that in mind, we also acknowledge that University of Alaska Fairbanks and all university lands, as stated by UA President Pat Pitney, reside on the traditional lands of Alaska's traditional Indigenous peoples all across the state. And with that in mind, this speaker series is a partnership between UAF's College of Indigenous Studies and the International Arctic Research Center, where every month we bring speakers in from either college or research center and talk about what work they're doing, hear from people, and hopefully spark some conversation. We'll hear from each speaker for about 10 minutes or so, give or take, and then open up the webinar to discussion and Q&A with all of the registered participants toward the end. And before I introduce our first speaker, I want to try to copy and paste into the chat one of the official links for disaster relief that UAF has been publicizing. It's from the Alaska Community Foundation, I believe. So that's a trusted source for getting help to people that are needing a lot of help right now. So with all that, thank you all very much for being here, our panelists and all of our participants. First speaker up is going to be Craig, and then we're going to hear from Olivia and then wrap it up with Erik. Craig, thanks for being here, and go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you. And I do have some slides, Mr. Arlo.
Ooh.
Hi, everybody.
Yeah, let me get that.
Oh, wait a second. While we're getting going, just really thankful and happy to be here. Definitely deep recognition of all of our families and friends in coastal Western Alaska impacted by the hurricanes and weather. I'm here down at AFN. Olivia, Henaayee, Irwin is down here as well, attending some elders and youth sessions and kind of tribal unity going on today. There's a lot of recognition and support for what's been going on. So really thankful that we opened up with that, and looking forward to just having a quick little discussion and presentation about some of my work. So yeah, we can get the slideshow up and going. My name is Craig Chythlook. My Yupik name is Gaviak. I am the Fisheries Policy Director for Native Peoples Action. Go ahead. Yeah, you can go ahead and advance to the next slide, Arlo. Self-proclaimed Craig the Fisheries dude. I've introduced myself in kind of a joking Yupik humorous way on the record at the North Pacific Council and other spaces to kind of break some of the tension there. But my folks are Joe and Molly Chythlook. I grew up in Bristol Bay. My family, my wife of 15 years, two boys and I are currently living in Fairbanks, but my whole life and childhood, I guess, through now, I've been a fisherman. I've grown up doing a lot of hunting. Some of the more recent hats, also a graduate student of the Tumulta program, housed out of the College of Fisheries and Ocean Science partnership with tribal governance and rural development. Spent a lot of time on the water, like I've mentioned, and where the culmination of all of this is brought me to is service in the policy arena for our tribe. So go ahead and please advance, Arlo. The organization that I work for, Native Peoples Actions, there's two arms, two branches to kind of the same tree, or two rivers to the same tributary, whatever analogy we want to use. It's a C4 and a C3. So both nonprofits, but one of the C4 gives us the ability at Native Peoples Action as staff that a part of my workload can be to directly lobby and our lawmakers or federal state agencies. Listed there are our leadership for the C4 and the C3, and a really good example of what that differentiation means. A part of my job this last legislative session was to directly endorse the appointment of our next speaker, Henaayee, as a Board of Fish member. So it gives NPA that ability to go to the House Fisheries committees and say, this is what our organization supports, and you should do X, Y, or Z. So I've really appreciated that arm of our little org. And then I think we're pretty familiar with C3s. It's our education and community arm. We've got some amazing leadership there, but our big focus is protecting our ways of life. So the organization, you can go ahead and advance one more slide, please, Arlo. The little organization that I work for was visioned up in 2016. We had some really brilliant and amazing people that recognized that there was a significant need for nonpartisan, statewide, indigenously led organizations to work in a way that is non-divisive and also really, really recognizing the brilliance and the focus that we've gotten from our tribes over the years. So I wanted to share our guiding principles and values when I hired on early in just a couple of years ago now. We spent some time understanding and figuring out what Native Peoples Action role is. So if we were a part of a tribe or a tribal organization like TCC or another org that works through resolution, they would have a constitution, and that's kind of their rule book. So as a Indigenous NGO, I guess we wanted to do something similar so that everything that we were doing as a little organization is uplifting our tribes, our tribal voices. We're not creating division, and really honing in on the collective values and principles that bring our communities and brilliant minds together. So we developed in partnership with our board members and folks from across the state that are involved with our leadership team, these 4 guiding principles. And one of the things that I really love is our primary focus is leading with love and building unity. In a lot of the policy spaces that I've been involved in, one of the things that's been really frustrating over the years is the misunderstanding or interpretation of Indigenous knowledge and how is that applied. Yeah. So how does your Indigenous knowledge fix this problem that your Indigenous knowledge didn't create? So addressing that early on in our vision, in our mission, is the recognition of the relationality and purpose of what I think collectively a lot of us feel. The indigenous knowledge and the inclusion of that is really relationships. My parents, a lot of our parents and aunties and uncles didn't teach us when we were hunting and fishing growing up that this information you're going to use to create a proposal that fixes this. That's not the case. They just love the crap out of us. So that's something that's been really grounding and helpful for our little org and how we move through space. So please advance the slide, Arlo. We are a small but mighty staff. As some of us may know or have heard, we just recently hired a new executive director. Andrea Gottlieb Burgess is originally grew up in the AYK area out of Bethel, the Bethel region. She's Yupik. She is coming back to NPA from the Nature Conservancy, where she led kind of an international Indigenous arm of the Nature Conservancy. She's also an original founder of NPA and developed the Native vision that kind of created RC3. So amazing leader. Really looking forward to her coming on board. Kelsey Ivanoff is our communication and Indigenous engagement manager. And as a little org, we need to be financially viable. So we have an amazing accountant, Elizabeth, who is also here to support us. So go ahead and please advance. So when we're thinking about this work and the purpose and the intent of the place for knowledge exchange, it's always important to understand your why. So to give an example, if we're going to go out to a community and ask for their support or their backing of a research project, or we're going to change a policy, it's like, why are you doing that work? Why are we taking up this space? These actually aren't necessarily NPA's whys. We held a work session here at the Elders and Youth Conference, and these are directly from the youth and the elders who are in the room. And this is something that I really appreciate about little orgs like NPAs. We have a lot of flexibility to be really grounded in what our why is. So what you're seeing on the screen, I'm not going to really read all of them, but some of the things that are really important are like uplifting our abilities to protect our ways of life, utilizing best available science, all of our capacity to directly support tribes and tribal organizations, and leading with love. And one of the biggest issues and areas of concerns when we think about the regulatory process is who's bearing the burden of conservation? Or if we're thinking about academia and research, is it the tribes or is it the university that's bearing the burden of capacity? Are we equitably funding our tribe's ability to engage in answering the questions about why are we here hanging out and talking with you, and why do we want to work together? So I thought it was really important that I shared that with everybody. And it's a big focus of how we interpret our guiding principles and move through space, is that it's really grounded and from the communities, from our tribal leaders and advocates, and just kind of what they need for the support in that regulatory and get out the native vote role. So please advance. For me personally, so I am pretty intentional about the information that I shared. I am the fisheries policy director, but NPA also has a big focus in building native power and get out the native vote. So training up our leaders, next generation of leaders. We have really good partners that like Maxine Diber and others who are training folks that are interested in running for office. And a big part of my work that's up and coming will be connecting the policies and regulations that impact our abilities to live our traditional ways of life, and the stance and the position that our future gubernatorial and Senate candidates take on these issues and concerns. Do you support fish? What's your stance on bycatch? And yeah, that's going to be a big part of like what NPA does moving forward. And physically, what does this look like, and what has been asked of our tribal organizations from Craig the Fisheries dude physically in space, and how do I uplift and support Indigenous knowledge and rationale? Well, a lot of times it's not burdening anybody. It's adding to their individual capacities to make an informed decision on an agenda item or a proposal that changes their ability to go out and hunt and fish. So we breed a lot, do a significant amount of NEPA analysis. So looking at the federal process and kind of breaking down, you know, these hundreds and hundreds long pages of documentation into a toolkit. So it's a roadmap and helps tribes and tribal organizations and people who want to show up and make an informed decision. This is what this document means. This is how it impacts our ability to live our traditional ways of life. And how can we help you make an informed decision in that space? So we write a lot of calls to actions. We create toolkits, and we also have the privilege of being put into a position to give and show kind of draft testimonies. If you support this or if you don't support this, this is a template that you can use to go and sit in front of a regulatory body and share your position. You don't have to say this word for word, but if you want to do this, this is how. So yeah, I have one more slide and then I'll pass this off. I don't want to take up any more time. What I want to leave us with, really, in the nature and the purpose of knowledge exchange, is the call to action. From my time with the university, working at IARC, Food Security, Food Sovereignty Working Group, spending time looking at the Arctic Observing Summit, I recognize a lot of names who were hopping on the call. And as I've transitioned into a nonprofit role where we're really focusing in on and listening, taking a lot of time and listening, these are some of the things that I would really like to highlight, that I would like to leave everybody here with. There needs to be a really continued focus and recognition of prioritizing tribal capacity. Really think deeply about our engagement, the funding, the sovereignty, and the respect that each one of our tribal nations deserve. So what does that look like? Engaging really early, really often, be receptive and respect tribal sovereignty. And we're going to hear from Mr. Erik, and he's done a really good job at that lately. Well, ever since I've ever known him. And it's really important to know that no matter what we do and how we engage in this space, that there are so many needs, because the tribes are responsible for absolutely everything that are happening in that community. So if we think about the state of Alaska, or even the federal government, and the many needs that the state has, it's not really a whole lot different from in some of the smaller communities. There's there's a lot of things that are going on. So just having a lot of that recognition. And we have a lot of places here on campus that are really uplifting that perspective and rationale. Tamamta, Drumbeats, Blast, IARC, College of Fisheries, Rural Development, Tribal Governance, One Health. So I listed a lot of these because a lot of these are folks that I've had such a privilege of working with my short time here at the university, and being engaged with folks like Arlo. a lot of these folks supported me and created opportunities for Craig the fisheries dude to work for a little nonprofit like NPA. And without a lot of that support, I think it would be very difficult for a lot of our Indigenous students to participate, take on some of these leadership roles. So that's NPA in a nutshell, and I will hand it off to the next amazing speaker. So thank you.
Right on. Thanks, Craig. Olivia.
Thanks, Arlo. And Abase, Craig, for starting us off in a really good way. That's a really great transition into what I'll be speaking to. Zayn Hazoon, everyone. Olivia Sauza, Dehundanaka Hidle Henaayee Seasni. My English name is Olivia. My Danaka name is Henaayee. I am a Nupiaq and Koyukon Athabaskan from the village of Nenana. And I don't have a slide deck, Arlo. Oh, perfect. Okay, great. I was about to say that'll be a challenge for me to cover Erik's portion. I'm a Nenana Native tribal member. I live and work in my grandmother's dry cabin in Nenana. I am the community liaison for the Yukon River Drainage Fisheries Association. And as Craig mentioned, I'm the most recent appointee to the Alaska Board of Fisheries. I took over for Stan Zaray's seat. So I'm really grateful and honored to be here today. I wanted to touch on some of what UAF offers for our Native students and for our students that are interested in participating in state and federal management systems. Yesterday, I was attending Elders and Youth Conference, and I just want to make sure that this chat is my audio unstable, Josie? No, it's good. Okay, great. Sorry, just wanted to make sure. While attending Elders and Youth Conference, I was actually in a session that Craig was leading on navigating the state and federal process. And one of our elders stood up, Francis Thompson from St. Mary's, and he said to us, "Not all of you will be able to be subsistence hunters and gatherers. Some of you need to go learn the Western way and return home to help your people." He was speaking to the young people in the room. And folks like Craig and I are individuals who have gone and learned the Western system of management and regulations and policies for the betterment of our people, while a lot of our other folks remain at home, keeping the ways of life alive in our traditions. The type of furthering education that I received through University of Alaska Fairbanks really propelled me to be able to take on the position that I'm in today. I started off, I believe it was 2021, was my first class with Dr. Carrie Stevens. Carrie Stevens. Ben Stevens at the time was working for Tanana Chiefs Conference, and a few others were helping lead those courses. They were weekend intensive courses that brought folks from the river into the city for a weekend, and either state or federal level management systems were taught. It was really important to empower our people who have such a story and a voice to share about where they come from and the resources around them. However, oftentimes when our people get up to the stand to testify, it can be overwhelming. Speaking to a board of 7 to 12, depending on which management system you're in, folks that are wearing suits, and many who might have no idea about your homelands. So through those courses, we were educated and taught a little bit about the process, how to navigate Board of Fisheries, Board of Game, Federal Subsistence Board, and North Pacific Fisheries Management Council, how to read proposals and how to testify. And it really empowered a lot of individuals to be able to go to these meetings and very effectively share their story and share why it matters to the decisions that are being made at the table. I know that the weekend intensive courses are being replaced now by full semester-long courses. So Professor Carrie Stevens is now teaching state and federal management classes for the semester-long courses. These are really great opportunities to learn these systems. And again, it is just as important that our tribes are still building their own capacity to steward their own homelands on through their traditional values and stewardship practices. But at the same time, we need individuals to be learning these systems and understanding them, because the rules and regulations will still be written for us if we're not a part of it. So with that, I also, in addition to taking those courses, took a class from Kevin Illingsworth, Federal Indian Law, which was really beneficial to understanding these systems and the history of what led us to this place. It's really important for us to understand all of the policies and laws that went into our current management system, because if we don't understand those, then we can't tackle them effectively. It is integral that our traditional ecological knowledge is consistently integrated into these management systems. There has been a couple policies that have been really important, and I don't know if folks are aware of them. Professor Carrie Stevens actually informed me of one a couple weeks ago. There's a joint board policy through the Board of Game and Board of Fish from 2002 that was written. That's a government to government relation policy with federally recognized tribes. Now, there's a lot of caveats within that policy. However, I think it's really important that folks are aware that the Board of Game and Board of Fish do have a policy on record. Now, it's not statutory or regulatory, so it's not to, they don't have the powers that be to hold them to that policy. However, it is written so that hopefully the board will make decisions based off of that. So that's a really important policy to recognize and for us to know about when attending these meetings. The other one is the traditional ecological knowledge policy that was passed through the Board of Fish in 2024. It was spearheaded by John Wood and Marit Carlson Van Dort, who's the current chair of the Board of Fisheries. And I just wanted to read this one portion of it. It says, "We use the term traditional knowledge rather than traditional ecological knowledge or traditional environmental knowledge, because the knowledge that is relevant to fisheries management goes beyond the ecological or environmental components of the knowledge system. Knowledge of human, animal, and human environment relationships, as well as values associated with the marine ecosystem and other aspects of how to live in and with the natural world, are all part of traditional knowledge and are relevant to the board's decision-making process." When this policy was enacted, it created a different process for testifying. It provides an additional opportunity for folks who are nominated by their tribe, community, or organization to give separate testimony as a traditional knowledge holder. So I would highly encourage folks, as we come into this meeting season, this meeting cycle, to remember some of these policies and to do your research on what these boards and management bodies, what their responsibilities are to tribes and local individuals. I also, before I end, just want to mention that all of this is only possible because of funding. Research and tribal governance programs, research that's integral for us to properly and effectively shift management systems, is currently being cut. And I fear that cuts to the tribal governance department or similar programs throughout our state and the country will limit tribal ability to effectively participate in our systems. We need consistent research and scientific data in order to properly come to these meetings educated and well-informed. And we need the furthering education through University of Alaska Fairbanks and other programs in order to harness our people with the power to attend these meetings and get into leadership positions. So I think that's all I have, and I'll pass it on to Erik. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Olivia. Awesome. Erik.
That was great. Thanks, Craig, and thanks, Olivia, for a really nice, I really appreciate what you shared. My name is Erik Schoen. I'm a research assistant professor at IARC. I'm trained as a fisheries scientist. I'm a lifelong Alaskan, so I grew up in Juneau, Fairbanks, and Anchorage. My parents are John and Mary Beth Schoen of Anchorage. And I live since 2012, so 13 years. I've lived back in Fairbanks with my wife, Jenny, and my kids, Maya and Toby. So I'm gonna, like I said, I'm trained as a fisheries scientist. I'm a non-Indigenous Alaskan. My family is from Western European descent. So today I'm going to talk from a little bit of a different perspective, from the perspective of a Western scientist who received no training in Indigenous knowledge throughout my formal education. This is stuff I've learned since coming back to Alaska, really, as a professional. And I'm convinced that if you want to do good science, if you want to do impactful, meaningful work in the fisheries space, Indigenous knowledge is key to doing, to understanding what's going on, to making an impact, and to doing good science. So I'm going to make a case for that from that perspective. So let's go to the next slide, please, Arlo. So my research and a lot of the people in my lab, a lot of our research focuses on questions like what is driving ups and downs in salmon runs. We do a lot of research on king salmon in the Yukon and Kuskokwim rivers, as well as other species and other rivers around the state. I'm not going to talk about that today, though. Today, instead, I'm going to focus on the actionable part, so more policy oriented. So what can we do about it? How can we help salmon recover? How can we help fishing communities adapt to these changes? Next. And I'm going to make the case that fisheries scientists like me can't solve these problems on our own. Just like Olivia said, this isn't just a biology problem. There's a huge social dimension to this. It goes beyond, even within the realm of Western science, it goes beyond biology. It encompasses atmospheric science, climate, land use change, all these things. So really, we have to get out of our silos. We have to talk with people who have a different background, have different expertise. And I've really appreciated being at IARC because we have to do that. We're a multidisciplinary organization that really values Indigenous knowledge and Western science. I was challenged when I started at IARC to engage more with Indigenous communities, and people held my feet to the fire on that, and I appreciated it. And it came with support and, I guess, love and compassion, and be like, hey, we can see you don't know how to do this. Like, here's some ideas, here's some help, here's some introductions. I really appreciate people like Craig for helping me in that journey. So I'm just going to start with a couple of quotes from Dr. Kavika Winter, who's a professor at the University of Hawaii. He gave an amazing plenary talk at the American Fisheries Society meeting in Hawaii last year. Two things really stuck with me. He said, to adapt and thrive in a time of change, we need to learn to be knowledge weavers. And then he also said science can help translate Indigenous knowledge into policy. So those, I certainly won't claim that I can do those well, but those are really guiding principles that I've tried to bring into my work. And I think the second one, science can translate Indigenous knowledge into policy, is really meaningful for me, trying to think of how I can use my training in Western science to help policymakers better understand and be able to grapple with and harness the huge value and the huge knowledge, Indigenous knowledge, that maybe they've overlooked in the past, or maybe they have had good intentions but haven't really known or had the training to understand or to put to use in their policy decisions. So let's go to the next one. So a couple examples. We had a project that that I led that involved a huge group of collaborators, where we were trying to understand what was causing king salmon declines in the Yukon and Kuskokwim basins, and in all the little productive tributaries, the spawning grounds across those basins. So we started that off by holding a workshop. So we didn't want to just have a couple of university scientists sit down with the data and just run models and write a paper. We knew that was going to be inadequate for this really complex question. So we invited a bunch of Indigenous leaders, agency scientists, people who spend time on the water from around these regions, US and Canada, to come to UAF and we had a bunch of people join on Zoom as well. And we learned a ton from people who had different backgrounds than us. We learned about people's observations, things like deep concern about heat waves and how salmon were coming back smaller than they used to, a lot of concern about bycatch, and different tools that are out there, downscale climate models, things like that. So we wrote a paper. This was led by postdoc at the time, Megan Fettern. And we made the case in this paper that we can't just be sit in our fisheries science silo and try and crack these nuts. This is too hard. Really, we can do better. We can understand these problems better if we integrate, if we bridge knowledge systems and include things like community-based monitoring programs, traditional knowledge, climate models, agency data, observations from people on the river, and remote sensing. So we made that case in this paper. Craig was a part of this. I really appreciated his contributions, and he really challenged us. I'll give you a ton of credit, Craig, for you weren't going to let the scientists just kind of sit there and do our science thing. You really made us think, and Craig really challenged us to think beyond just, okay, climate's driving salmon populations. Like, okay, great, what do we do with that? Like, let's talk about policy. So really appreciate those contributions. Let's go to the next one. So I think probably most people are already aware, but all these I'll list 3 knowledge systems here: Western science, Indigenous knowledge, and local knowledge, which includes non-Indigenous people who spend a lot of time on the river, like Stan Zaray, who Olivia mentioned recently. All these knowledge systems, I would say in general agree that changes in climate and ecosystems are contributing to salmon decline. So a couple examples: in the river, flooding and predators can reduce salmon survival. This is an area that I think Indigenous knowledge is just extremely rich, and we hear people bring this up at meetings. We see this posted to Facebook. People are noticing changes in predator populations. I'm trained as a predator prey ecologist, so this is super interesting to me. We can bring some tools to bear, that like genetics tools, that can help to, I guess, uplift and translate that Indigenous knowledge into graphs and figures and stats that policy people can maybe wrap their heads around a little bit better. But I think this is a super fascinating area where if we can braid together Indigenous knowledge and Western science, we can make great progress. Next. So out in the ocean, marine heat waves and competition can reduce salmon survival and body size. These are key drivers for why salmon are coming back smaller. And then let's go to the next one. And then when the adults return to the river, high river temperatures, and then the ichthyophonus parasite are huge. There's growing evidence that these can reduce adult survival. These can kill salmon before they are able to make it back to their spawning grounds. So I've cited a bunch of studies here. These are all Western science journal articles, but almost all of these were either inspired by or incorporate or bridge Indigenous knowledge, local knowledge, and Western science. So I think pretty much all of these papers here wouldn't be either would not have happened at all, or wouldn't be nearly as strong or as nuanced or as well developed without the contributions of Indigenous and local knowledge. Let's go to the next one. So I guess leaning more into the action, like what can we do? Just going to list a couple examples. So how can we help salmon recover and fishing communities adapt? One example that came from Tanana Chiefs Conference that I really appreciate. My colleague Andreas Lopez here at UAF is a geneticist, and we were talking about this new tool, environmental DNA, eDNA, and we were trying to write a proposal to study eDNA related to Yukon salmon. We talked to a colleague at Tanana Chiefs. We pitched an idea to him, and he's like, yeah, that sounds kind of interesting. That'd be okay, but can you help us count fish? Like, our weir keeps getting blown out at Henshaw Creek because of floods, and it's like our traditional weir counts, we're really getting challenged. So can you is there any way we could use eDNA as a tool to count fish that could work even during floods? So we latched onto that. We thought that sounded like a great idea. We got great support also from ADF&G and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And we basically, we are trying to tackle this problem that flooding as well as funding gaps are causing these weirs and counting tower projects to either be completely shut down and discontinued, or the ones that keep running, they get blown out, or they get with such high flows that they can't adequately count the fish. And when there's no fish counts, the managers don't know how many fish have made it back to the spawning ground. So they have to be more conservative, and they're less apt to open fishing opportunities for people on the river. So let's go to the next slide. So we're working with tribes here to try and strengthen salmon monitoring networks with new technologies like eDNA. So we have two projects. One is wrapping up with TCC and ADF&G and Fish and Wildlife on the Yukon, 5 Yukon tribs. And then one is still, I guess also wrapping up on the Kuskokwim River in partnership with the Kuskokwim River Intertribal Fish Commission. On both projects, the tribal and agency field crews filter river water at their weirs or the counting towers in combination with their traditional counts. And then the next click will show our team extracts and quantifies salmon DNA out of those filters. And we're trying to understand how, whether this could be another tool in the toolbox to basically help count salmon as they return to our streams. So next slide. And we have another new project that I'm really excited about. This is a partnership with Olivia's organization, YRDFA, Yukon River Drainage Fisheries Association, where we're trying to tie this all together to understand how, so the climate's changing, we have habitat issues, we have changes in predators. How do we take all that information and weave it together to understand like a laser focus on what can we do about it, the action, habitat restoration, supporting salmon stewardship, traditional salmon stewardship in subsistence communities. And we're learning some really cool stuff. So we have some great grad students on this project. Kristen Reese, you can see in the photo on the left there, she's sitting next to a culvert measuring river temperatures. And if you click the next slide, we found that at this culvert on the Chena River, right near Fairbanks here, we've found a big school of baby king salmon that they're sitting in this warm water flowing out of this slough. They couldn't get through the culvert because it was all blocked. But they were sitting in this warm water, we think, so they could grow faster, so they could get bigger before they hit the ocean. So we're interested in whether cleaning these culverts, maybe installing bigger culverts to allow these fish to get into these off-channel habitats, could allow maybe in some of our impacted watersheds like the Chena, allow fish to actually thrive a little bit better in this changing world. And this work also involves traditional ecological knowledge interviews that YRDFA is conducting in villages, and a bunch of culvert assessments that the YRDFA crew is leading. Okay, next. I am not a policy expert. I'm just going to say that straight up, but Craig and Olivia are, and I've learned a lot from them. And then I've been influenced too by my colleague and friend Eva Burke, who's at the Yukon River Intertribal Fish Commission. Eva was at a meeting with me where we were talking about habitat restoration, and she challenged us. She challenged the white settlers, I guess, or the Western scientists, which those are, I mean, not all Western scientists are white. I don't mean to imply that, but she challenged me personally, saying, hey, look, I showed up here for this habitat restoration meeting. We need people like you to show up to advocate for policy, like show up to the North Pacific, show up to the Board of Fish and speak out on policy. And that's uncomfortable for me because I'm not a marine policy expert by any means. That doesn't come naturally to try and tell the council what to do, or the Board of Fish what to do. However, I respect, and I guess I definitely see her point. So I signed on and I helped co-author a policy brief that came out this summer that addressed some of these issues. I'm not going to read them all, but we address things like bycatch, setting a hard cap on chum bycatch, area M intercept fishing, hatchery stocking and competition at sea, uplifting indigenous salmon stewardship practices, and adding voting tribal seats to these policy bodies. I'd be happy to talk more about these specific recommendations, but I guess I hear the challenge. I certainly can do more, and I accept the challenge to be a stronger or a more informed advocate in policy spaces. So just one more slide and I'll wrap it up. I think lastly, I think if we're talking about taking action, it's super important to get youth involved. So I've been really fortunate to work with some amazing colleagues like Kristen Reese and Brandy Kammermans, who are both on the call. I was able to accompany them to the Kuskokwim Basin last summer. We visited Bethel, where they led hands-on genetics activities at the ONC and UAF Science and Culture Camp in Bethel. And then next click, we went out to a remote gravel bar on the George River, which is kind of between Crooked Creek and Sleep Mute near the village of Georgetown. And Kristen and Brandy taught a bunch of high school students, really incredible advanced high school students from the region, about how to sample environmental DNA and even how to run a PCR experiment. This is on the gravel bar in the evening after dinner. So that was, I was just there as like unskilled labor, but it was super, super fun and enjoyable. And I was really inspired to see these youth and how many like they're driving jet boats like absolute pros. They're measuring discharge, they're catching fish. These kids are really accomplished already. They haven't even finished high school. So I'm really optimistic for the future if we can continue to get youth involved. And with that, I'll say thanks and let's open it up for questions.
Awesome. So cool. Thank you, Erik. Thank you, Olivia. Thank you, Craig. So much stuff going on. We've got about 12 minutes for Q&A discussion.
There is a question that came through in the chat. Do you want me to read it out loud for everybody? I live on Bristol Bay salmon and it's a healthy run at the moment. Can fill my freezer and smokehouse with abundance of fish, but with the fish on the decline, especially in the Yukon and Kuskokwim rivers, are there further studies being done? That's the question. And then there's some background information there. Are there entities or agencies looking into more in-depth or investigating more? My theory is overfishing, climate change, and ocean trawling fish is part of our native culture. We lose the fish, we lose part of our culture. And in my opinion, it's too little too late because I have little faith in the Yukon Kings will ever recover along with chum numbers. So great points there. Does anyone want to respond or take that?
I can take a stab at it. Yeah, I think those are excellent points. I think a lot of people are really concerned about Yukon Kings and chums. I'm hopeful, especially that chums might bounce back relatively fast because it seems like the collapse that happened a couple of years ago was linked to a really intense marine heat wave, at least in part, and that heat wave has subsided. So we're starting to see chum come back. Kings, it's really, I mean, I really truly hope the Kings rebound, but it's been a long decline. There's a lot going on there. So I think we got to do our best to help them, give them a fighting chance. There's a ton of people doing research on all these things that you mentioned. I think the research is important. And I think also we can't just study it forever. We got to take action, and there's things we can do right now. So I think there's policy actions we can talk about it, as far as marine fisheries. There's habitat we can fix in freshwater. I think, yeah, we got to be doing all of it.
Thanks, Erik, for that answer. That was a really good answer. I would I would also just highlight that with the high volume of reds that we're seeing, especially like in Bristol Bay, it's really important for us to acknowledge the need for enumeration and data. And it becomes even harder actually to enumerate kings whenever on some of those river systems when we have such an influx of reds. And so while the harvest of Bristol Bay reds right now is what I can see as sustainable in terms of prior years meeting of escapement and their run sizes right now, it's really important to watch that population because many folks weren't paying attention to Chinooks outside of the Yukon, and our Chinook numbers are starting to decline in other places within the state. So we need to have a proactive approach. So be recognizing these red numbers, seeing what the trend is going to be. Are they going to go down again? And in that meantime, while we're still able to harvest from those reds, also keeping the pressure on the department to enumerate kings and have effective measurements for collecting that data in those mixed fishery stocks. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said already. Just looking at the question directly, you know, I spent my whole life fishing the sockeye stock out of Bristol Bay, subsistence and commercial. We are seeing a relative abundance of sockeye in the region. There's quite a bit of information out there. One of the first folks that come to my mind are two people really are Dr. Daniel Schindler and Curry Cunningham, doing a lot of good work out of the Bristol Bay region, and they give analysis, assessment about the sockeye population and maybe rationale about why they may or may not be doing so well. But a couple of issues that I would like to bring up that are falling in line with what's going on across the state of Alaska. In 2022, 2023, the Chinook salmon in the Bristol Bay region, and the only location that they're enumerated, was designated a stock of concern under the Board of Fish. So it's just a recognition that there's something going on. 5 out of 6 years, the fish counting for Chinook didn't meet the minimum escapement. So it's a far cry from what's going on in other parts of Alaska. But what's really, I think, important, looking at the rest of your question about what are the action items that can be done, and what Erik pointed out, we could study this to death. Yeah. There's 1,000 excuses. One of the brilliant pieces and bits of information that I consistently like to share, the only reason that we have abundance across the state of Alaska is because of our tribes. The only reason that we have the state of Alaska in 1975, and the Magnuson-Stevenson Act was established in 1976, so the federal side. The only reason that they have kind of a stolen delegated authority to manage our resources for us with that fiduciary responsibility, it's not because of anything that Western science or the department, state and feds have done. It's because of our Indigenous knowledge, because of our understanding. So when our tribes, our advocates, our policy people are saying things like overfishing, bycatch issues, we have changing conditions that are really heavily impacting the return, it's coming with the weight of thousands and thousands of years of experience on this issue. So really appreciate the question. There's a lot of it's a very complex issue. What I love about this series is that it does a really good job at just recognizing the need for both types of knowledge systems to work very closely together. And I will do a shout out to a wonderful person on the call, at least she was earlier, is Therese Vicente from Kuskokwim River Tribal Fish Commission, partnering with Erik and others, are doing some amazing work that are directly answering these questions. So there's a model out there of how how, from an Indigenous perspective of people who have a deep relationship and love of the land, how are we going to move forward? The answer is there. Yeah, it's just the political will to really continue to uplift, and there's no validation needed, but to really uplift the different types of knowledge systems in that space. So, yeah, thank you for that question.
The answer is there, man. So cool. I think that's our summary line for this month's episode.
Arlo, there's another question. We have a couple more minutes.
Oh,
I just
yeah.
wanted to get to it. There's one that came in for Erik about the salmon fry at the block culvert. You mentioned there may be there to accelerate growth in the warmer water, yet they need cold water for survival. I'm assuming the water temperature was within the preferred range. And a question mark about that, if you know. Do you have thoughts on how we can speed up culvert replacements in our salmon streams?
Yeah, thanks, Tori Brennan. That's a great question. So the Chena River is actually the main spawning and rearing grounds are pretty darn cool. It's a really cold stream relative to other streams in the Yukon Basin and the Cusco, and it's actually colder than the optimal temperature for juvenile growth. Juveniles can handle pretty darn warm water relative to adults, and in general, in a warmer year, the juvenile king salmon grow bigger in the Chena. During the heat wave year of 2019, they kind of stalled out, they plateaued. So we don't want to get, that wouldn't go on forever, but we were measuring the temperatures. These fish, they weren't down here at the bottom of the water column in front of that culvert. It was a couple degrees colder. To the right, it was a little colder. They were like right in the warmest spot when we moved our little YSI probe all around. And that matches what we know from bioenergetics models for the optimal temperatures for growth. So that's just a hunch, but I guess that's my guess right now. We're looking into it more though. And then how can we speed up culvert replacements? I don't know, but I think raising awareness that Yukon Basin isn't untouched, perfect wilderness like a lot of people think. We don't have massive dams like the Columbia. It's not Seattle. We're doing better than that, but we have a lot of habitat that's screwed up from 120 years of mining, tearing up our streams. We've got tons of culverts. We've got tons of impacts, even in villages. There's fish passage issues. So I think raising awareness, there's things we can do, there's things we can fix. I think that's an important first step.
And then a couple more. I know we have like 2 more minutes. Is there any studies in ocean temperature monitoring, ANF logging? And then how can students, tribal members, and youth get involved? Anyone feels compelled to answer either one of those?
I can take a shot at the involvement question. I'll leave the ocean temperature up to my ally scientist over here, or my policy friend. There are so many ways for us to get involved in these management decisions. To start off with, your tribe has a lot of power. As tribes that are federally recognized, there's a federal trust responsibility that requires consultation with tribes that are going to be affected by a given project. Some of the tribes have been using this throughout the North Pacific Fishery Management Council CHUM EIS process to conduct consultation prior to the meetings with agencies. So as a tribe, there's a lot of power within the tribe with the federal management system. On the state level and the federal level, there are advisory committees and local advisory councils. There are 80 local advisory committees to the State Board of Fish and Board of Game. In order to get on that, all you need to do is show up, have some knowledge of the area, and get enough votes from the people that are in the room. Whenever I got on my Mintoni Nana local AC, I had very little knowledge of regulation or policy. I just knew that I had a passion for my people and our ways of life. And so I highly encourage folks to look into applying for your local advisory committee or your local regional advisory council, the RACs, which are the federal side. And then, as I mentioned before, furthering your education, taking tribal governance courses through University of Alaska Fairbanks, taking federal Indian law courses, tribal self-government, tribal stewardship. These are all ways to get involved.
That's great, Olivia. And I'll tackle the ocean temperature question. So yeah, there are a lot of ways that ocean temperatures are measured and tracked. I think it's critical that those keep getting funded. We're seeing huge challenges to NOAA, to AUS, the Alaska Ocean Observation System. If those important monitoring programs get defunded, like those buoys out there, we need that data. That's really important. We don't always know what we're going to need that for, but when there's a harmful algal bloom in a couple of years and we have the temperature data that'll help us understand what happened. If there's another marine heat wave, we gotta have that data. So that's super important. It's being done right now, but some of those programs are in jeopardy of losing their funding.
Right on, man. That was a lot to cover in 1 hour. Lot to consider. So good to hear that so much is going on and happening, and the solutions are out there. Right on. Thank you all. Thank you, Craig, Olivia, Eric. Thank you, co-hosts, Santa, Josie, and another great monthly installment of our shared speaker series between College of Indigenous Studies and the International Arctic Research Center.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, for interested folks, if you want to follow up with anybody here, you can reach out to them or reach out to us here at IARC or CIS, and we'll get you in contact.
Yes, thank you very much for the invitation, providing the space. Please feel free to reach out.
Thank you, Craig and Eric, for all you shared.
Thank you guys. Take care.